What if the greatest heartbreak of your life was never caused by another person, but by the version of them that existed only inside your mind? The day you stop romanticizing people is the day you begin seeing reality without illusion. And once that happens, your relationships, your peace, and even your identity will never be the same again. Have you ever ignored obvious red flags because you believed someone would eventually become who you imagined? Have you ever loved someone's potential more than their actual behavior? If that question makes you uncomfortable, stay until the end, because today we're uncovering one of the most dangerous psychological habits a person can develop, the habit of falling in love with projections instead of reality. And what you'll discover may completely change the way you see every relationship from this moment forward. If this message is already making you question someone you've been idealizing, pause for a moment and subscribe. These conversations are designed to challenge comforting illusions and replace them with deeper self-awareness. And if you've ever mistaken fantasy for love, leave a comment with the word reality. You may discover you're far from alone. Most people believe they fall in love with another human being, but psychology often reveals a more unsettling possibility. Long before a relationship develops, the mind quietly begins constructing an image that may have only a partial connection to reality. A smile becomes proof of kindness. A few thoughtful conversations become evidence of deep compatibility. Shared interests are interpreted as signs of destiny. Little by little, imagination fills the empty spaces where genuine knowledge should exist. What begins as curiosity slowly transforms into certainty, even though very little has actually been confirmed. The unconscious prefers complete stories over unanswered questions, so it supplies details that feel emotionally true even when they have never been tested by experience. This process is rarely deliberate. It is influenced by old memories, childhood expectations, unmet emotional needs, and hidden desires that seek expression through another person. Someone who longs for safety may instantly perceive reliability in a stranger. Someone craving acceptance may mistake ordinary politeness for profound understanding. The mind is not attempting to deceive itself out of malice. It is attempting to create emotional coherence, weaving fragments of reality into a comforting narrative that promises fulfillment. The problem begins when that narrative becomes stronger than direct observation. Instead of asking who this person consistently proves themselves to be, the mind asks how well they fit the role it has already assigned. Once this idealized image takes root, contradictory evidence becomes surprisingly easy to ignore. Broken promises are explained away as temporary stress. Emotional distance is interpreted as hidden vulnerability. Inconsistency is renamed complexity. The imagined version becomes so emotionally valuable that protecting the illusion feels safer than confronting the facts. This is why people often defend relationships that quietly drain them or remain attached to individuals who repeatedly reveal incompatible values. They are responding less to the living person before them and more to the carefully crafted figure their inner world has produced. The moment this illusion weakens, reality does not suddenly become cruel. It simply becomes visible, exposing the difference between what was hoped for and what was always there. Projection is one of the quietest psychological forces shaping human relationships because it rarely announces itself. Instead, it disguises itself as certainty, intuition, or even love. A person believes they are seeing someone clearly when in reality they are looking through the lens of their own unconscious desires, fears, and unresolved experiences. Rather than discovering another person's true nature, they unknowingly place parts of themselves onto that individual. The other person becomes a screen upon which hidden hopes and emotional longings are projected. This creates an emotional bond that feels incredibly real, yet much of it is built from the observer's inner world rather than the other person's actual character. Imagine meeting someone who displays confidence and warmth. If you have spent years searching for emotional security, your mind may instantly decide they are trustworthy before trust has ever been earned. If you carry an unfulfilled desire to be deeply understood, a few meaningful conversations may convince you that they know your soul. These conclusions feel natural because projection works beneath conscious awareness. It quietly fills unanswered questions with emotionally satisfying assumptions. The less you truly know about someone, the more room the unconscious has to invent qualities that reflect your own needs instead of their reality. This explains why people are often shocked when someone's behavior changes, even though the warning signs were present from the beginning. The signs were not invisible. They were simply overshadowed by projection. Words carried more weight than actions. Potential became more convincing than consistency. Small gestures were magnified into proof of extraordinary character, while repeated disappointments were minimized as temporary exceptions. The imagined version of the person slowly became more important than the person standing in front of them. Real emotional maturity begins when projection loses its power. Instead of asking who you hope someone is, you begin asking who they repeatedly reveal themselves to be through their choices, habits, and treatment of others. You stop confusing possibility with reality and allow time, consistency, and observable behavior to replace assumption. In that shift, relationships become less dramatic but far more genuine because they are no longer built upon fantasy but upon the steady evidence of truth. One of the greatest illusions the mind creates is the belief that a person's potential deserves the same trust as their character. Potential is attractive because it points toward what could exist someday. Character, however, is revealed through what consistently exists today. Many people become emotionally attached not to the life they are actually living with someone, but to the future they imagine that person will eventually create. They convince themselves that enough love, enough patience, or enough understanding will transform promises into reality. In doing so, they slowly stop evaluating the relationship based on present behavior and begin measuring it by imagined possibilities. This is why so many relationships remain alive long after they have stopped being healthy. A person says they'll change when life becomes less stressful. They'll commit when the timing is right. They'll become more emotionally available once they heal. While growth is certainly possible for every human being, genuine transformation is never guaranteed simply because someone wishes for it. Hope becomes dangerous when it replaces observation. Every future version of a person exists only as an idea until it is supported by repeated actions. Character is not defined by intentions, dreams, or emotional speeches. It is defined by consistent choices made over time, especially when no one is watching. The unconscious often resists accepting this distinction because believing in potential feels more comforting than confronting reality. Letting go of an imagined future can feel like abandoning years of emotional investment. The mind whispers that one more chance, one more conversation, or one more sacrifice will finally reveal the person you have always believed was hidden beneath the surface. Yet every passing day quietly delivers the same message through behavior rather than words. People continuously reveal their priorities by what they repeatedly choose to do, not by what they promise they hope to become. Emotional maturity begins when actions become more persuasive than possibilities. Instead of asking what someone might become in the future, you begin asking who they consistently are in the present moment. You stop falling in love with unfinished stories and start respecting observable reality. This shift is not cynical or pessimistic. It is an act of wisdom that protects your peace, preserves your self-respect, and allows genuine love to grow only where character has already proven itself worthy of trust. Emotional hunger has a remarkable way of changing how people see the world. When the heart has gone too long without feeling understood, appreciated, or emotionally safe, even the smallest act of kindness can appear far more significant than it truly is. A simple text message feels like deep devotion. A brief moment of attention seems like undeniable proof of love. A casual compliment is interpreted as a sign of extraordinary connection. The mind is not measuring these moments objectively. It is measuring them through the lens of deprivation. Just as a starving person values every crumb of food, an emotionally deprived person can mistake ordinary gestures for rare treasures. This is why loneliness often clouds judgment. It does not simply create a desire for companionship, it reshapes perception itself. The unconscious begins searching for relief, and once it finds someone who offers even a small sense of comfort, it eagerly fills the gaps with hopeful assumptions. Instead of asking whether this person is genuinely trustworthy, emotionally available, or consistent, the mind rushes to protect the possibility that they might finally satisfy a long-standing emotional need. The deeper the hunger, the easier it becomes to overlook contradictions, excuse poor treatment, or ignore patterns that would otherwise be obvious. Fear of abandonment strengthens this illusion even further. When someone secretly believes they may be left behind, they often cling to relationships that require endless excuses. They become more concerned with preserving the connection than evaluating its quality. In this state, affection feels scarce, and scarcity makes people overestimate its value. They begin chasing moments instead of examining patterns, celebrating occasional warmth while overlooking repeated emotional distance. The relationship becomes fueled by hope rather than evidence. Real clarity arrives when emotional needs are no longer allowed to dictate perception. Instead of asking how intensely someone makes you feel in isolated moments, you begin observing how consistently they treat you over time. Respect, honesty, reliability, and emotional responsibility become more meaningful than excitement or temporary reassurance. As inner security grows, emotional hunger loses its power to distort reality. You no longer seek someone to complete what feels missing within yourself. Instead, you recognize genuine connection because your judgment is guided by stability rather than longing, allowing truth to become stronger than desire. Reality has one quality that illusion can never defeat: patience. Illusions can survive for weeks, months, or even years, but reality never becomes exhausted. It quietly waits beneath every excuse, every hopeful interpretation, and every imagined future until the truth eventually reveals itself through repeated experience. This is why no relationship can remain sustained by fantasy forever. Sooner or later, words must be matched by actions, promises must become habits, and intentions must be reflected in consistent behavior. When they are not, reality begins to push through the cracks of the story the mind has been protecting. At first, these moments appear small. A promise is forgotten. An apology is repeated without meaningful change. Respect becomes inconsistent. Affection appears only when it is convenient. Each incident may seem insignificant on its own, making it easy to explain away. The mind prefers preserving its emotional investment rather than admitting it may have misjudged someone. It creates explanations that soften disappointment. Perhaps they are simply overwhelmed. Perhaps the timing is wrong. Perhaps they will understand your value eventually. Yet while these explanations continue multiplying, behavior quietly remains the same. Reality does not argue with imagination. It simply continues presenting evidence. This is why actions possess a unique honesty. Words can be carefully chosen, emotions can be exaggerated, appearances can be maintained, but repeated behavior is far more difficult to disguise. Every decision a person makes reflects what they consistently value, whether they admit it or not. Over time, patterns become impossible to ignore because they reveal priorities more accurately than promises ever could. Reality speaks through consistency, not through occasional moments of perfection or emotional intensity. Many people experience deep disappointment when illusion finally collapses, believing reality has suddenly become cruel. In truth, reality has not changed at all. What changed was the willingness to see it without the comforting filter of hope. The person before you is often the same person they have been from the beginning. The difference is that your attention has shifted from who you wished they were to who they repeatedly demonstrate themselves to be. This realization may feel painful, but it is also deeply liberating because once reality becomes clear, your choices are no longer controlled by fantasy. They are guided by truth, and truth is where genuine freedom begins. Many people believe heartbreak begins the moment someone walks away, betrays their trust, or chooses a different path. Yet the deepest pain often has a different origin. It begins when the imagined version of that person finally collapses. The grief is not always for the relationship that truly existed. More often, it is for the future that was envisioned, the promises silently expected, and the emotional story the mind had carefully written long before reality had a chance to speak. This is why disappointment can feel so overwhelming. It is not merely the loss of another person, it is the loss of an entire inner world built upon hope, expectation, and fantasy. The unconscious invests tremendous emotional energy into these imagined possibilities. It creates conversations that have never happened, moments of understanding that have never been experienced, and a future that has never been guaranteed. Every act of kindness becomes part of a larger narrative. Every shared dream strengthens the belief that the story is unfolding exactly as expected. Because these images are emotionally meaningful, they begin to feel as real as lived experience. When reality eventually contradicts them, the mind struggles to separate what truly existed from what it desperately wanted to exist. This explains why two people can experience the same breakup with entirely different levels of pain. One grieves the relationship itself, the other grieves the collapse of a dream that had grown far beyond the relationship. The greater the distance between reality and imagination, the more intense the disappointment becomes. It is not only the person's absence that hurts, it is the realization that the version you loved was never fully present outside your own perception. Accepting this truth can feel like waking from a beautiful dream that can never continue. Yet disappointment carries an unexpected gift. It dismantles illusions that would have kept you emotionally trapped. As painful as the process may be, it creates space for honesty where fantasy once ruled. Instead of asking why someone failed to become the person you imagined, you begin asking who they consistently revealed themselves to be all along. That shift transforms disappointment from a source of bitterness into a doorway toward wisdom. The fantasy may disappear, but in its place grows something far more valuable: the ability to recognize genuine character, trust observable reality, and build future relationships upon truth rather than hope alone. Psychological maturity does not arrive the moment a person gains more knowledge or accumulates more life experience. It begins when they develop the courage to see others as they truly are, rather than as they wish them to be. This requires a quality that many overlook: discernment. Discernment is not suspicion, cynicism, or emotional distance. It is the quiet ability to observe without allowing desire, fear, or fantasy to distort perception. A discerning person does not rush to label someone as perfect or hopeless. Instead, they allow time, consistency, and behavior to reveal the truth naturally. This way of seeing demands patience because the human mind prefers quick conclusions. It wants certainty, especially in relationships that awaken deep emotions. When someone makes us feel understood, admired, or emotionally alive, there is a temptation to overlook contradictions in order to preserve those feelings. Discernment resists this impulse. It asks different questions. Does this person's behavior remain consistent when circumstances become difficult? Do their actions reflect the values they speak about? Can they be trusted when there is nothing to gain? These questions shift attention away from charming first impressions and toward lasting patterns that reveal authentic character. One of the greatest signs of emotional growth is learning to trust repeated actions more than emotional intensity. Words can inspire hope, apologies can sound sincere, and promises can create excitement, but character quietly announces itself through everyday choices. Respect is shown repeatedly, not occasionally. Honesty survives inconvenience. Kindness remains present even when admiration is absent. These qualities cannot be manufactured for long because they arise from the structure of a person's inner life rather than from a desire to impress others. As discernment grows, relationships become healthier because they are no longer built upon assumptions or idealized expectations. Emotional decisions become less reactive and more intentional. Instead of chasing excitement, you begin valuing stability. Instead of confusing attention with commitment, you recognize the difference between temporary emotion and enduring integrity. This transformation does not make the heart colder, it makes it wiser. You remain open to connection, yet you no longer surrender your judgment in exchange for hope. In that balance, trust becomes something that is earned through evidence, protected by self-respect, and strengthened by the quiet confidence that truth is always more reliable than fantasy. The moment you stop romanticizing people, something unexpected begins to happen. You do not become colder, less compassionate, or incapable of love. Instead, you become free from the exhausting cycle of chasing approval, explaining away harmful behavior, and carrying relationships that survive only because of your imagination. For the first time, you stop investing your emotional energy in who someone might become and begin appreciating people for who they consistently choose to be. This shift is not about losing faith in others. It is about placing your faith in reality rather than illusion. Freedom begins with clear vision. When the fog of idealization disappears, you no longer feel responsible for rescuing people from the consequences of their own choices. You stop believing it is your job to heal every wound, excuse every broken promise, or wait endlessly for someone to become the version of themselves you have created in your mind. You recognize a simple but powerful truth. Genuine love does not require you to ignore reality. It asks you to embrace it with honesty. From that honesty comes peace, because you are no longer fighting against what is plainly visible. As this clarity grows, your boundaries naturally become stronger. You no longer confuse compassion with self-sacrifice or loyalty with silent endurance. You learn that saying no is not an act of rejection, but an act of self-respect. Distance is no longer something to fear when it protects your emotional well-being. You become more selective about who receives your trust, not because you expect perfection, but because you understand that trust is built through consistency, accountability, and mutual respect. Relationships begin to feel lighter because they are no longer sustained by constant hope that someone will eventually change. Perhaps the greatest reward of seeing people clearly is that it creates space for authentic connection. When you release fantasy, you become capable of appreciating sincerity even when it appears in ordinary forms. You stop searching for perfection and begin recognizing integrity. You stop chasing intensity and start valuing stability. The relationships that remain are no longer built upon projections or unrealistic expectations. They are rooted in truth, strengthened by mutual effort, and sustained by genuine character. In that freedom, love becomes less about escaping loneliness and more about sharing life with someone who has consistently shown through both words and actions that they deserve a place within it. There comes a moment in every person's life when the greatest transformation is not discovering who someone else really is, but discovering how often the mind preferred illusion over truth. That realization can feel painful because it forces you to release stories that once gave you comfort. Yet hidden within that pain is an extraordinary gift. The moment you stop romanticizing people, you stop giving your peace to imagined versions of them. You stop negotiating with reality, hoping it will someday resemble your expectations. Instead, you begin living with open eyes, grounded in what is consistently true rather than emotionally appealing. This does not mean becoming suspicious of everyone or closing your heart to love. It means allowing love to mature. Mature love is not built upon fantasy, desperate hope, or the desire to rescue another person. It is built upon honesty, mutual respect, accountability, and the quiet confidence that character reveals itself over time. When you learn to value actions above promises and consistency above intensity, you protect not only your heart, but also your sense of self. You no longer confuse longing with connection or potential with commitment. You understand that genuine relationships never require you to abandon your discernment in exchange for temporary emotional comfort. Perhaps the greatest freedom of all is realizing that your worth has never depended on convincing someone to become the person you imagined. Your value remains unchanged whether another person recognizes it or not. Once you understand this, you stop chasing unavailable people, stop explaining away repeated disappointments, and stop carrying emotional burdens that were never yours to bear. You become someone who walks toward truth instead of away from it, even when truth is uncomfortable. So the day you stop romanticizing people is not the day love disappears. It is the day real love finally has room to enter. The masks become easier to recognize, the patterns become impossible to ignore, the illusions lose their power, and in their place emerges something far stronger than fantasy, a life guided by clarity, relationships built on authenticity, and a mind no longer imprisoned by projections but awakened by reality. That is where lasting peace begins, and once you experience it, you will never again mistake illusion for love.